facit injuriam. The act of the law does no one wrong, but uphold justice. One of the most famous Latin legal presumptions of law is ignorantia legis neminem excusat, which means ignorance of the law is no excuse. Some of us do appreciate such legal expression, while others do not, on the basis of fairness and unfairness, justness and unjustness, morality and immorality. Whether you know the law or you do not, you are part of the law. Because the law is made for you, and you must know the law. Thus we bring you the legal hour. Actus nemini facit injuriam. The act of the law does no one wrong, but uphold justice. One of the most famous Latin legal presumptions of law is ignorantia legis neminem excusat, which means ignorance of the law is no excuse. Some of us do appreciate. Hi viewers, welcome back to the Legal Hour show in Freetown Television Network. Chapter 5 with me, Bakarr Marrah. It's a show that always brings to the cause legal analysis that gives you detail about the law itself to know your civic and political rights, and if these rights are violated, what would you do? And today our topic of discussion will be the right of man and the threat of COVID-19, and due to that I have two proficient guests with me in the studio. I have with me Mr. Ibrahim Bangura, Esquire of Legal Aid Board. Good evening and welcome to the show. We also have with me Mr. Tejan Esquire, the Public Relations Officer of Sierra Bar Association. Good evening and welcome to the Legal Hour show.
Good evening and thanks for having me.
Viewers, our topic of discussion would be the rights of man in the trend of COVID-19. In other words, we are looking at the perception of human rights at this current status. And before we start our discussion, let's just take a quick look at our legal news for this episode, and it revolves around one of the recent activities of the Anti-Corruption Commission, in which it was successful in secure an indictment against one Mr. Alhaji Fode Camara, who is a supervisor of schools and also a former caretaker principal of the Sri Lanka Secondary School at Potloko. Let's just take a look. Has filed an indictment against Alhaji Mohammed Fode Camara, supervisor of schools and former caretaker principal of Sri Lanka Secondary School Potloko and of 16 Lunde Road Potloko, on 4 counts of corruption offences bordering on misappropriation of public funds and property contrary to Section 36, subsection 1 of the Anti-Corruption Act number 12 of 2008. The investigation confirms that between January 2018 and July 2019, Alhaji Mohammed Fode Camara, in his capacity as supervisor of schools and caretaker principal of Sri Lanka Secondary School, Potloko, misappropriated public property to which 33 bundles of corrugated zinc materials valued in the sum of 14,890,000 yuans, 536 pieces of boards valued in the sum of 18,750,000 yuans, and 50 benches and chairs valued in the sum of 816,700 yuans, all being property of the school. Similarly, between the 1st June and 30th June 2019, Alhaji Mohammed Fode Camara, in his capacity as supervisor of schools and caretaker principal of Sri Lanka Secondary School, Potloko District, misappropriated the sum of 6 million yuans, being funds intended for the payment of departmental support to heads of departments of school. Meanwhile, the indictee is expected to appear in the High Court holding at Makeni on a date that will be determined by the Master and Registrar when court session resumes. The Commission wishes to reassure the general public of its continued resolve to curb corruption at all levels in Sierra Leone. For FTN's Legal News, Bakarr Marrah reporting. Alright viewers, welcome back to the Legal Hour show here at Freetown Television Network, Chapter 5 with me, Bakarr Marrah. Well, today our topic of discussion is the rights of man in the trend of COVID-19. So many of us have different perceptions about human rights, that these rights are violated, these rights are supported. We all have our different saying about human rights in the present status when we are having the COVID-19 and those other measures being put in place to service we can contain this COVID-19 and thus to educate you properly on human rights in the present status of COVID-19. I have with me two proficient guests that are going to educate you and give you relevant information about human rights in the trend of COVID-19. So I start with Mr. Ibrahim Bangura, Esquire from Legal Aid Board. Our topic is the right of man in the trend of COVID-19. So what is your perception?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, before I delve, I may like to inform viewers on the meaning on the wide perception of human rights. Firstly, if we talk about human rights, we have to mirror it from a broader perspective globally. When we talk about fundamental human rights, these are rights that are inherent. They are natural from a point of view that you are being accorded those rights by virtue of fact that you are a human being on planet Earth. It is natural. From the day you are born, those rights are inherent, irrespective of your race, tribe, tradition, place of origin, whatever it is. Those rights must be applied indiscriminately.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Jha, what is your take on the topic, the right of man in the trend of COVID-19?
Well, my learned friend has already given you the definition of what human rights are. All I will have to add is the fact that human rights has been given legislation. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the UN created by the UN Charter. We have domestic as well as other international instruments that deal with human rights. For example, we narrow it down to Africa. We have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We also have, down in our countries here, we have Chapter 3 of the 1991 Constitution, which deals with human rights. So human rights is very fundamental. So what I understood from what we are to discuss is what is our human right during this COVID-19 pandemic, and what do we expect, whether or not those rights can be curtailed, whether or not, if they are curtailed, how can they be curtailed, and what are the parameters or the ambit of law within which they can be curtailed. So to my mind, I think that's what we'll be discussing.
Of course, and we are going to look at human rights at two perceptions or perspectives. One, we're going to look at the domestic level, Sierra Leone measures being put in place to at least render and also safeguard these human rights, and also the international standard. But let's start with our domestic laws, like our 1994 Constitution. Chapter 3 talks about human rights itself, and there are plethora of these rights, but we're going to talk on few as are very much relevant for the present status. Now let's just take a look at this section 17, the protection of arbitrary arrest and detention. Some of us, when this idea come to us, we think it's just you being arrested forcefully. We all have different perceptions. So being that one can be forcefully arrested or detained, and this will serve as a right to service, it can prevent you from you being arrested illegally or injudiciously. So how this really apply? Mr. Joe, please.
Alright, Chapter 3 of our Constitution actually deals with human rights generally. You mentioned the right from arrest or detention. It's a fundamental human right that everybody should have freedom of movement. But in certain situations, these rights or these particular rights can be abrogated or can be taken away. That's why when we have this pandemic, the president in his view, in his opinion, as provided by our constitution, has declared a national emergency. And in state of emergency, the constitution allows certain rights, including the right to movement, to be curtailed. Now, during this period, they can, or government can, promulgate regulations that would, for example, deal with the arrest and detention of persons. Let's say, for example, we've been hearing that there's particularly this case 19 who has been going around the place infecting people, which is one of the reasons why, in fact, the courts were closed down. Now, when case 19 was arrested, the law would provide that case 19 be detained so that he will not continue to infect other people. So in such a situation, clearly, because of the state of emergency and because of any other regulation, such person can be detained. But detention under our constitution, or to hinder you to move from one place to another, can be guaranteed where, for example, the detention was imposed or is imposed by order of court, or where the detention is for public safety or security, or where the detention is for the prevention or the spread of disease, like it's happening for case 90. So these are the situations where both international and domestic
Yeah,
legislation.
so in times like this, having the COVID-19, we understand that we are under the ruling of public emergency, and that's so. But also, there are no stringent or visible standards or regulations of how this public emergency is supposed to be done. So, if one is being detained or is being arrested, perhaps for not actually obeying the lockdown or any other measure being put to place without other measure of what will happen as a punitive measure, do you think that is an adequate way of you being detained in the confines of the law?
Like I said, during state of emergencies, your rights are restricted, but they must be restricted within the ambit of the law. Now, what happens usually during states of emergency is that regulations are given, but there are many or various arguments as to whether do we actually need regulations to be laid before Parliament so that the state of emergency would have effect, or do we rely on the inherent powers given by the president, given to the president under the constitution so that he can regulate? Those are the various arguments we have. Okay, so yes, somebody will argue that there is no law to prevent me from not to gather in public. There is no law that should prevent me not to go out at night. There is no law that should prevent me not to go to club, for instance. But what we see is that when you go to club, or when you gather in public, or when you have crowded place without no social distancing, your right to associate, your right to assemble in crowd, your right to move from one place to another will infringe on another man's right. That is, if you have the virus, you may have to infect other people. And as such, by so doing, you have violated the right of other people to enjoy sanity and good health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim Bangura from Legal Aid Board. Now let's take a look at Section 20 of our Constitution that talks about inhuman treatment. So let's say during the previous lockdowns that we've been having, we've actually realized, experienced, and some of us have seen that we are beaten for going against the law. So this is like an inhuman treatment. So do you think this is supposed to be it's supposed to be the rightful standard in times like this?
Of course, the answer to that would be a big no, because by reason of the fact that Section 20 of the 1991 Constitution is clear on that. There is a protection against inhuman treatment. I'm not sure, because it's vaguely that you have said so, but I'm not sure there is a particular case scenario that you will advance, for us to just deliberate on. But should in case any authority or person tramples or contravenes against that provision, then it is a clear justification for that person who is the victim to bring an action against that violator, because it's a violation of the victim's rights. It is not right, of course, to violate Section 20, thereby arbitrarily violating the said right. Now, if in a hypothetical situation, say for instance, let's say a situation exists. However, there is a caveat, because when we talk about fundamental human rights, these are rights that are interdependent. A situation that exists, say for instance a violent situation, which requires in turn an adequate proportion of force to quell out that violent situation. It cannot be said that the rights of those persons involved in violence have been violated. That is one case scenario. It depends on the scenario because for fundamental human rights, when you talk about one right, it has to some extent, bear or around the rights of another. So, for you to say, Section 20 again, currently in the current trend, as you can see, there are arbitrary arbitrary arrest and detention.
Yeah, hasn't going on.
Yes. So if you say arbitrary arrest and detention are going on, it all depends on the case scenario. So now, if an authority, say the police force, are going to a particular scene of crime or violent scene of crime, and the situation there is so abysmal that should they stand, look at the said violent situation continue, there may be tendency to lead to other serious offenses. So, in those cases, what is appropriate for the police to do is to arrest and make detention. So, it cannot be said that that is an arbitrary arrest and detention. So, it all depends on the case scenario. So, what you have given me now is just vague. So, if, say, you bring in a particular case that we will actually analyze, if clearly it's a clear arbitrary arrest and detention of somebody, then I will appreciate that. But hypothetically, as I have made it clear to you, it all depends on the case. But for one or an authority to arbitrarily arrest and detain another in times like this, I mean, without the confines of the law, clearly it is legally wrong. Constitutionally, it is wrong.
Right.
If that is done within the confines of the law, then it can be justified.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, let me give you self-experience. I think 2 weeks back, actually, I was trying to approach the constituency, so I used the State House atmosphere, but I actually failed to put on my face mask. And one of the soldiers called me, and he actually threatened to beat me up unless I have to beg him. So let's say if I hadn't begged him, then he should have actually beat me up. And that should have been inhuman treatment in such period like this.
I mean, I'm not sure if the regulations that have been passed by His Excellency will be around that.
Of course, it wouldn't be.
Thank you very much. Because if such regulation is enforced, then you are required, to respect the regulation. But be it as it is that there isn't no such regulation, I mean, it cannot be justified for a military personnel to tell you that if you don't fix up your face mask, they will beat you up. I mean, if he so does, then you have your right, to channel it at the Supreme Court.
So do you think Sierra Leone, like a plethora of the population, actually know their human rights?
Of course not. Of course not. I believe largely there should be education on that, because you and I will testify that in Sierra Leone, I would like to say that majority of our population, countrymen, are illiterate. They are not educated. Sorry to say, but that's the blatant truth. I mean, even those of us who are educated, how many of us will spend time to look at our constitution, our rights, what they entail? Not all of us have the time, in fact.
Mr. Job, we've realized that so many people in Sweden do not know their basic human rights. So, as a P.R.O. of the Sierra Leone Bar Association, what have you done, or what do you think that's supposed to be done for this part of the people in Sierra Leone to be aware of their fundamental human rights and freedoms and liberties?
Well, I didn't think I was there in my capacity as P.R.O.
Of course, yeah, of course, but yeah, either way, you are a
No,
legal man, no?
I am
You
here
represent an
in my
institution
private
legally. That's
university.
it.
Okay.
Alright, so
I cannot speak now
okay,
um, on behalf of the Bar Association because the Bar Association did not send me here.
of course, yeah.
Okay.
Alright,
But what I would say as a lawyer is that, like my learned friend has said, most of our people, if not the majority of them, are not aware of their rights. Or even if they are aware, they do not know in detail what their rights are. Okay? All of us have been hearing human rights.
exactly.
But most people do not know what is this human right. Also, I must mention that human rights or all rights go with responsibilities. You cannot claim your rights if you do not know them. And in order for you to know your rights, you must learn them and know your responsibilities as well. Now, because of the high percentage of illiteracy in our country, we see not only the police, including the judiciary, including other law enforcement agencies, are violating the rights of people largely in a very broad spectrum. And this is due to the fact that rights are not enforced. Why are rights not enforced? Because some of them are not in the Constitution to be enforced. They are just declaratory. When they say declaratory, it is just there.
Okay.
You do not have the mechanism to enforce it. For example, in our Constitution, there is the right to life. The only time that right can be taken away from you is when you have a court order passing a death sentence on an individual. That is when and only the area when such a right can be taken away from you. Now, in other countries, in other constitutions, let's take for South Africa for instance, it is the right of every individual or citizen in South Africa to have access to health facilities, health treatment. Now, people in South Africa can take the government to court, for instance, and say, government, you have not provided for us better health facilities, or in the community where I live, there is no good health facility or hospital. So, as per the constitution in South Africa, you can't take the government to court on that. But in our constitution in Sierra Leone, no. You cannot take the government to court for
Well, I
that.
think to give a more supportive factor whether people know their right, let's just take one of our videos which was a vox pop I did on human rights. I tried to get the views of people of their human rights and what can they say about it. So let's just take a quick look and come back to our discussion. Hello viewers, this is FTN's Legal Hour with me, Bakarr, and this episode our topic of discussion will be based on the right of man in the trend of COVID-19. And due to that, we are in the streets of Freetown to get the views of people. How do they think about human rights, and to some extent, if these rights are violated or they are supported? So join me as I get their views. What's your name, please?
Mohamed Kamara.
So, Mohamed Kamar, what can you say about human rights?
What
Can you say about human rights?
human rights? Well, all about human rights, according to my own understanding, right? Giving an individual his own right that he has to encompass or do something that he was capable to do. That's all about human rights.
Okay.
Then, secondly, all about human rights, right? Should go about the right way in doing things. For example, in the environment, we should stop doing violence towards some people.
Alright, do we have human rights in Sierra Leone?
Well, in Sierra Leone, let me say, yeah, we have human rights in Sierra Leone.
Example of these rights?
Well, for example, we have the FSU,
Okay.
the Family Support Unit. I think that's an example of human rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think human rights in Sierra Leone is being violated or is being supported?
Well, for now, let me say human rights is being violated because let me say some of the things that I was seeing nowadays, is very perpetual. So actually, I don't think human rights is violated for now. because before human rights is existing, but for now, the present time, human rights has been violated.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Yes,
Yes.
ma, you can tell me your name, please.
Yeah, my name is Teresa Conte.
So there is a concept. Now, what you think about human rights?
Human rights, like for example, like make I say now for this corona area we don't can this we country so, like the government sort and fit say, like for law go be free from this sick here, it always say it out some certain things we go able for avoid them so that we not go get contact in this sick here so. So like for example like this face mask so they use a very important because if like you don't go on the street like 2-3 people like they talk you go free from that sick day like the virus go scatter like where the breeze they go so you go able for prevent you safe you not go able
Okay,
for
so
get
give
that
me an
virus
example
day.
of any human rights.
For example you get rights for like make us say like you dey walk on the street so for example something happen you get freedom of speaking. You get like for make us say like for example where you go na bank you team up na line so first you know for camp for like a court before you say yes na me first camp
So
before
you
you
feel
say
say
this.
all the rights that also still exist?
Yes,
You cannot violate
yes,
them
for
at all?
me, to me, your understanding, it still exists.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you. Your name, please.
I name Hassan.
Mr. Hassan, what do you think about human rights?
Well, I mean, the thing say human rights, you know, you forget freedom in the country, all until day, and we get any difficult something, human right for fight for you, all until day. But for now, we not get human rights again at this country, yeah. Human right no dey. We not get freedom of speech. We not get them for this country. For now, we not get them. You know, for grumble for stay too hard. The one way a fine for, they attack you for that. For sitting hard for me. You know, they attack you for that. For so I make it for sit so. You know, like when me say not to all man thing look fine for. That particular to me, me not absolutely talk to so. Thing not fine for me for this country at all.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hassan. Good afternoon.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
Your name, please.
My name is Mr. Ba.
Mr. Ba, you get any idea about human rights?
Well, the human rights when me know about. Well, clear we officer they waiting the Yagba we then they not call for because of they say human rights. Therefore give we chance where would they do work. Like waiting until we now no overload. Now no take pack bad.
Violated in this country, while others think that they are supported. This is FTN's Legal Hour with me, Bakarr Marrah. Show here on Freetown Television Network, 35 with me, Bakarr Marrah. That was just a vox pop trying to have the views of people on human rights. And we got to realize that many of them do not know their human rights. Some think human rights is just, let's say, you having a job, policeman harassing you, all those steps about the nitty-gritty of human rights itself is not being realized with their own concept. So, Mr. Ibrahim Bangura, yes, of Legal Hour. So, how did you perceive the vox pop?
I mean, it is clear from the first and second, in fact, all of the surveys you conducted, that majority of our countrymen do not really understand the concept of human rights. Now, it is hilarious, but I mean, it will be very vital and necessary to have a public education on this particular concept because it is one of the very, very important and significant concepts in every constitution. When you talk about human rights, these are egalitarian in nature. They should be enjoyed by each and every person or individual within a state. That's why international level it is recognized and it is being domesticated by majority of countries. Okay. For instance, as my learned colleague stated here, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter on the People and the African Charter on the People and Economic Rights, and so many other regional instruments or conventions, they are being domesticated in our own country. That tells you how significant and important those rights are. So, for those rights to exist in our constitution, and yet the citizens are not fully aware of their meanings or essentials or the ingredients, what they entail, it is very unfortunate.
Of course,
So, if they are not aware of their rights, how would they even enforce those rights?
of course, yeah.
It begs the question.
Don't have no knowledge about it. So, Mr. Jahala, you were talking about the right to health, and in Sierra Leone, I believe in Chapter 2 of our Constitution, Section 8 talked about the right to health under social objective of the government. But also, Section 14 makes it not justiciable, including Section 6, the political rights, and of the right to education, the economic rights. So, do you think that is somehow vital or relevant for it not to be justiciable?
Well, for now, this is the constitution we have. Of course, when it's not justiciable, it means we cannot enforce it.
Of course, yeah.
So if you ask me from a human rights perspective, it's not good in our constitution. Because the right to health is very important. We see during the Ebola, our health system was down there, very poor. Now we have COVID-19. It's exposing our health system. When the Ebola outbreak occurred, we noticed that we do not even have enough ambulances. We do not even have enough nurses and doctors. The same trend is continuing even now on the COVID-19. We see that for COVID-19, even countries with robust and very equipped medical facilities, they are still crumbling under the COVID-19 pandemic. How much Sierra Leone, where we do not have enough doctors, enough nurses, we do not have test kits, we do not have ventilators, we do not have even hospital beds. What will happen to us? That's why it is very important, because if the right to health was justiciable, in the sense that the people of Sierra Leone could have taken all the government or all the parties who have ruled us over the years, we could have taken them to court to make sure that we have better health system. Perhaps condition would have changed. Perhaps our health system would have improved. But since they are not there, look, for example, if you go to countries like South Africa, they have improved health system, and yet COVID-19 has embarrassed them. You go to other countries, the US, the UK, people are even complaining that there is not enough face masks, protective equipment, and so on in the UK. And they are holding their government to account because of that. So these are the things we are saying. So as long as you have this, you need to enforce your right or right to health that are justiciable. But our constitution do not provide that. So you cannot hold the government to account because of that.
During this trend of COVID-19, we actually realized that some of the rights that have been limited are the right to conscience, that is to religion, not church guardian, no mosque guardian. So how could you actually analyze on that? Like the right to conscience, section 24 talks on that in our constitution. So how could you actually analyze with what is really happening? It's been limited, and we have the COVID-19 crisis.
What is?
Now the right to conscience, like the right to religion, not so, and it has been limited in the trend of COVID-19 in our present status.
Yes.
So as a legal-minded individual, how could you analyze such trend, having our rights to conscience being limited, no church guardian, no mosque guardian, and we have people out there who have been actually saying all ill-sworn and obscene words that this shouldn't supposed to be the case. Our rights to worship, our rights to our mosques, our churches should be limited, but other rights should be limited. Do you think it is appropriate?
Yes, when in a state of emergency, it depends on which spectrum you are standing. In a state of emergency, as long as it is in the opinion of the president that a particular event has happened that threatens the peace, security, and health of a nation, he can declare a state of emergency. That is very constitutional. In order to enforce the state of emergency, he may pass regulations, including protective measures, which we are seeing in the fact that churches or people are prevented from going to places of worship. including churches and mosques. Now, is this proper in a democratic society where the constitution is the supreme law? Yes. Does it mean that it is right in the circumstances? Yes. But however, do we say because people have right to freedom of conscience, therefore, as long as there is this virus going around, they should be allowed to go to their places of worship? The question is no. But what we usually agree and what we argue on as human rights practitioners is that whenever there are measures in place, they must be proportionate to the situation or the circumstances at hand. That's the argument. So, is the prevention of people going to churches and mosques to worship God appropriate in the circumstance? My argument is yes, because we know now that COVID-19 can be spread in various ways, including inhaling of, it can spread through the atmosphere. It can spread by touching, coughs, and sneezes.
Yeah.
So, the mere fact that we are in a crowded place, what happens is that somebody can sneeze, somebody can cough, and so on and so forth. And then we have chains of infection. At the moment, we have what they call community transmission. That is, now people are no longer importing it from outside the country. It has gone through the community and is spreading from one person to another in the community. Now, as of today, we have, I think, 330 something. The thing is sporadically and rapidly spreading. It becomes fearful. So think about it. Have government not put measures in place to prevent church gathering or prayer in mosque? Would it have?
Yeah, I think you are in the right position of such proposition. So, Mr. Ibrahim Bangura, what could you say about the freedom to expression and also the press as enshrined in Section 25 of our Constitution in times like this, COVID-19 are?
Yes, of course, we know that freedom of expression is another right that is being guaranteed under Chapter 3. And in times like this, it is still being guaranteed. Say for situations warranting the proclamation or declaration of the state of emergency, which may be found or which are found under Section 29, subsection 2 of our Constitution. In the opinion of the President, the Constitution, under the ticket of Section 29, authorize the or empowers the President to make such regulations or makes take such other steps which are expedient or necessary in the circumstance. In the opinion of the President, if the President thinks fit that expression or certain statement or certain expression may provoke a situation which will lead to unrest in times like this and which will break the public order or safety of the general citizenry, then it will be expedient for the President to make a regulation which will touch and concern that particular area. So, as it is, our freedom of expression is still guaranteed, and it has not been taken away from anyone.
Okay. But in the Vox Pop, we had one of the guys who said that their freedom of expression has been limited at this particular period of COVID-19. Perhaps he might have experienced it, or he might have faced it, or he might have been intimidated based on that. So perhaps let's just say, based on what he had said,
yes, like I
such
said,
expression might have been limited, or
like I said, our freedom of expression is still guaranteed. The Constitution, under the ticket of Section 29, subsection 5, empowers the President to make regulations or take such measures which, in his opinion, are expedient and necessary.
Okay, emergency, of course.
Yes, in proper governance or good governance of the country, to avert certain unfortunate situations. And now, by extension, same the subsequent subsection, which is subsection 6 of section 29, by extension, gives the president immense powers to order, in some cases, for the detention of certain persons,
Okay.
to restrict the movement of certain persons from one locality to another. Even by extension, it also empowers the president to deport persons, except citizens, from Sierra Leone. These are all measures geared towards public safety
Thank
and
you
in the
very
interest of the
much.
public.
Mr. Ja, when it comes to human rights, people have been using the phrase rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. How does rule of law actually create a nexus with human rights?
Yes, the nexus is very important. In fact, it is the rule of law that guarantees human rights. Rule of law protects and promotes human rights because respect for the law and the fact that no one is above the law or should be above the law is what the protection and promotion of human rights is all about. And in a democratic society, the rule of law reigns supreme. What is it? That no one is deemed or should be above the law, that everybody is equal before the law. Of course, naturally, you cannot expect me and the president to go to court and they treat the president as they are treating me.
Of course, yeah.
That's not what they are saying. But like he mentioned earlier when he was describing human rights, that this is a right that is inherent to every human being. And it should be guaranteed to everybody irrespective of race, gender, color, and so on and so forth.
Of course, yeah.
Everybody is entitled to
Alright.
it.
And when you use
So when you are applying human rights in terms of rule of law, that is, when they say, for example, the right to life, it doesn't matter who that person is. You must protect that right at all costs. Nobody is above the law. That is, even if it's the president, he just cannot kill somebody like that until that death penalty is imposed by a competent court of law.
Equality before the law. Okay. Now you did say we can't expect us to have the same rights as the president has. So are you trying to say that any inequality the law accepts it's still equality before the law?
No, that's not what the thing is. What I said was this. You don't expect, for instance, even though we are equal before the law, you don't have right to practice as a lawyer. I have the right to practice as a lawyer. You cannot say, oh, we are equal, you are going to court. You cannot go there.
Okay.
There are rights that are ascribed to the president that we do not have. You don't expect the president to enter into court and they don't give him chair to sit. Why is the ordinary criminal who stand up throughout trial?
Because based on Tom Bigger, I think the former landlord in Britain, he actually wrote a book, The Rule of Law, and he did say that any inequalities the law accepts in its confines, it's still equality before the law. Because the law itself actually distributes or gives such privileges to such persons.
Exactly.
It's
I want to buy that.
Exactly. Well, that's the position. That's the position. In fact, that's not actually what inequality or equality before the law actually espouses. What it espouses is that the treatment should be equal, fair, above the above in the circumstances. You cannot say Mr. X is white and Mr. Y is black. They cannot get the same health facilities. Or for example, you take somebody to Cottage or Connaught Hospital and you treat Mr. X special than Mr. Y. Despite the fact that they pay the same money, they have the same sickness, they should be treated by the same doctor. You understand?
Right.
Those are circumstances.
Guys, this is Legal Hour here on Twitter with Television Network. Share 35 with me, Marrah, and our topic of discussion is the rights of man in the threat of COVID-19. And time is now against us, so we are about to close. We have a lot of things to discuss on, but time is now against us. So I'm gonna have the the last statement of our guest here today. We've actually educated you on the right of human liberties and freedom in the trend of COVID-19 and how this right can be limited. So since time is against us, even though we hate to go, but we ought to go. So Mr. Bangura, Ibrahim Bangura from a lawyer from Legal Aid Board. So what could be your last statement for today's episode?
Basically, of course, I am a human rights lawyer myself sitting here. However, we all know the deadly nature of COVID-19, how devastating it is. It has the tendency to bring our very country to a non-existent country. So, as much as it has that tendency, it makes it, in the circumstance, one of the very reasons, as I stated earlier, under the ticket of Section 29, subsection 2, in the opinion of the President, to declare a state of emergency as such as it is now. And by extension, should the President pass or make such regulations which have to touch and concern the situation at hand, it is expedient, it is proper in the sense, all sense of it. For the protection, mind you, the state has another very significant and important function of protection of citizens' lives and property. So, in this instant situation now, should he sit by and just allow the virus to spread across without making such regulations or such expedient rules and regulations, it will have to hit back at the state. So, in the circumstance, as it is now, even though it appears that some rights may have been violated, but they are being justified under the confines of the law, especially within the ambit of our 1991 Constitution, more so particularly Section 29.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim Bangura, Esquire from the Ed Board, and I hope to have you in my subsequent programs. Mr. Ja, the Public Relations Officers of Sierra Leone Bar Association, what could be your last statement for this episode?
In addition to what my learned brother has said, the COVID-19 is real, and the President has declared state of emergency, and the measures he has put in place are, in his opinion, necessary to preserve the health and safety of every Sierra Leonean, to protect the state, to provide, to preserve our economic and political rights. So these measures are in place for a good reason, and the Constitution empowers the President to say that, to do such measures in place. However, I would advise fellow Sierra Leoneans to fight the COVID-19 with all what we have and keep to these safety measures for our own good, or else we are headed for a darker day.
Thank you very much, Tejan Isgaja, Esquire, and the P.R.O. of the Sierra Leone Bar Association. It's been an honor having my studio, and I hope to have in my subsequent programs. Thank you very much. Well, viewers, this is how we come to the end of today's episode. Our topic being discussed is the rights of man in the trend of COVID-19, and I have been your presenter, Bakarr Marrah. And if you miss any of our discussion, you can also join us live on our Facebook page or on our WhatsApp 076 697 Thank you very much, and many thanks to my producer, Tap. Goodbye.
One of the most famous Latin legal presumptions of law is ignorantia legis neminem excusat, which means ignorance of the law is no excuse. Some of us do appreciate such legal expression, while others do not, on the basis of fairness and unfairness, justness and unjustness, morality and immorality. Whether you know the law or you do not, you are part of the law, because the law is made for you, and you must know the law. Thus we bring you the Legal Hour. Actus nemini facit injuria. The act of the law does no one wrong, but uphold justice.